Well, Doctor, let's hear from our examiner. We have with us Mrs. Harriet Pilpel, who's
Okay,
well
let's see
known
what he
to
has
this
with the
viewers of
feminist.
this program. Mrs. Pilpel is an attorney with Greenbaum, Wolf and Ernst, a graduate of Vassar and of the Columbia Law School, and very active in a number of liberal and
Debate
feminist
formats are funny,
movements.
are so
Mrs.
funny.
Pilpel.
I would like to ask both of you, if I may, the same question. Both of you seem agreed that in the 1950s, Harvard and Yale excluded blacks and Jews and were
30s.
30s?
Yeah.
Excluded blacks and Jews. And in fact, in another program, Bill, you said that you think it's the other way today, that Harvard and Yale discriminate against Anglo-Saxons.
Well, to the extent that they believe in affirmative action, they would necessarily have to discriminate
I
against
would like
somebody.
to know what you think changed this attitude from discrimination against blacks and Jews to, in Bill's opinion anyway, the opposite extreme.
May I?
Yes.
I don't see it as a change of attitude. I see it as a change of whose ox is gored. And the change is simply a political change in the larger society. It's cheaper for non-profit organizations to discriminate, no matter who they discriminate against. Therefore, you would expect them to be in the forefront of discrimination, whether it is direct discrimination or reverse discrimination. And that's largely what you find.
Well, you're saying that it was to their advantage to discriminate against blacks and Jews before, and now
No,
it's
it was
the
never.
other way?
It was never to their advantage to do so, except insofar as they simply had prejudices, which they were able to indulge. I'm saying that whatever they do, discrimination costs them a lot less than it costs someone in a competitive industry. Highly competitive industries, for example, sports and entertainment, have typically been much more open than much more closed-in kinds of non-competitive things like public utilities and non-profit organizations, foundations, universities, hospitals, and so on.
What would you do to help?
Do you agree with that statement, Miss? Do you agree with that statement? That's the thing. Instead of just throwing a lot of rhetoric, I'm getting right now.
Those blacks who are still in a very low economic condition, in terms of education, for example, how there are, as you said, many blacks today who are still being given totally inadequate education, cannot be expected to get very far for that reason. What would be your remedy for that?
I know.
That's very easy. I would allow their parents to have a choice of where to send them to school, whether that choice is called a voucher scheme, open enrollment, tuition tax.
They don't have a choice.
Kind of
That's
scheme of
even
that sort.
back then.
It
Wow.
would put that power in the hands of their parents, mainly because that would mean that the schools would have to be responsive to them. As it is now, the school is a monopoly. They need not be responsive. I have relatives right here in New York whom I've had to intervene for because the schools would not even treat them decently, much less give them access to the information they wanted that they were entitled to under the law.
If you put it in the hands of the parents, and the parents are themselves uneducated and not really aware of what the various potentials are, what makes you think that they would decide more intelligently than the present system?
Wow. Miss. Wow. Really, you don't think parents do believe what is best for their kids? Have you ever heard breaking a cycle? Wow, that's crazy. So she's arguing that the government has their best interests in heart with all this community when we know that's not even true. It never been true because the reason we are in this mess, or even back then, I don't even know when was this done, is because of the government interfering in the government. Am I wrong with this? That's bold, man.
I think, again, history. As blacks emerged from slavery, a minute percentage could read or write. Yeah. And yet, in half a century, over half the black population was literate. An economic historians call that
even
one of the
half
most
a
remarkable
century.
things in history.
I mean,
if
the
you look
advance
back
was
to the
good.
era prior to the Civil War, when there were free blacks, about 500,000 in the United States, they not only were not allowed in the public schools, they were in some states forbidden even to send their children to private schools and had to do so clandestinely. And yet the census of 1850 showed that most free blacks could read and write.
That
so
is
I don't
so
think
interesting.
That, the fact that people have little education.
That is so interesting. And it makes sense because it's not free, right? Education is not a right. It's a privilege, right? If you have a well-established society, then you can just give free education. But today we have free education, right? And I'm not saying that yes, it's not free because we pay taxes. I get it, right? But we all pay taxes, and all of a sudden we have this thing called a public school. But then the quality of the public school is very low, is because the privilege itself has diminished. When back then, being an educated person by society not only was a privilege, but it was a prestige. If you're a very educated person and you knew how to write and read, you you know you have the key for success. And just listen to him that back then they have a better chance of being successful than now that they have all the resources. And I don't think it has really changed that much. It make you think.
Means that they are in any way poorer judges than distant bureaucrats who have their own axes to grind in running the public school system.
But you yourself said that you thought one of the reasons why blacks were still in an underprivileged position, those who still are, was because they had not been given a proper education.
Yes.
And we are now talking about people who had not been given a proper education, making decisions for their children as to what is a proper education. And you're saying that they, if that was put up to them, they would make a wiser choice than the present efforts to integrate the schools.
Let me say that if they would not make a very different choice, it would be hard to understand the hysterical opposition of teachers' unions to giving them that opportunity.
Well, I have no comment on that, but I would like to know how Bill feels about improving educational opportunities.
I believe with Dr. Sowell that the voucher system obviously encourages parents to use the same kind of selectivity that's available to parents who have enough money to send their children to private schools, and that to give a versatility of choice, a flexibility of choice to parents of poor children, the same versatility that is given to parents of wealthier children is obviously desirable.
And you think that their ability to make the decision is equal?
No, but I think...
There we go with the equal word. Be careful with that. Because equal, it has to be equal. At the end of the result, needs to be equal. That's a trap.
It may be equal, it may be less equal, it may be more equal. I think that the phenomenon of the poor and uneducated parent who seeks for his or her children what he himself has never achieved for himself is much more commonplace.
Oh God, yes.
Than the kind of sated, self-satisfied parent who typically neglects the education of his child.
I think you'd have very few blacks who finished college, including myself, if they had to have college-educated parents to send them there. There was no one in my family that went to college before me, and among the blacks that I know of my generation, I would say that's the rule rather than the exception.
My son, the doctor syndrome.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that insofar as your own experience is concerned, you are clearly an exceptional person. And it is somewhat reminiscent of what the Minister for Women's Affairs said in France when she was asked whether there was going to continue to be a Ministry of Women's Affairs now that women had achieved such great strides forward. Her answer was, as long as the average woman does not have the same opportunities as the average man, we need to have a government office which will try to get them some sort of equal opportunity.
But it's precisely the government which is denying it in this case. It's the government which has been running these schools from which the kids graduate semi-literate. And for years, black parents have been sending their kids, not just me, but a whole generation of blacks, to college, to high school, whatever. If you look at the history of black education in the United States, that has been largely, at the beginning, an effort by the blacks themselves. It was 1916 before there were as many blacks attending public high school as were attending private high schools. So there's a very long history of blacks trying to get their kids educated. I might say from my experience, again, not my own story, but at black colleges, the parents who work nights and fathers drive cabs and mothers who scrub floors to see that their kid gets an education. If there weren't such people, you wouldn't see half as many blacks with college degrees today.
And they're beating down the doors of Catholic parochial schools, even non-Catholic blacks, to get in there.
Yes.
What
Interesting.
would you say of the total number of blacks where
Lady, but do you agree with that statement? That's what I want to say, because she's not even saying agree or not, but it seems like she doesn't agree, but she don't want to refute that statement itself. So itself, it becomes, the debate becomes null. See, there's no back and forward here that we can just get substance out of it.
In private schools or beating down the doors of parochial schools, would it not be a considerably less than half percentage?
That's right, because they don't have the money. And you could have made exactly the same argument against the GI Bill, that why should you have a GI Bill for people to go to college when only the rich go to college? Well, the reason the rich were the only ones going to college at that time was because there was no GI Bill. The whole point of this is to put this choice within their hands. It is hard for me to understand what harm is going to be done by allowing parents to have a choice as compared to having self-interested bureaucrats have a monopoly.
Well, I think that your notion of parents having a choice overlooks the tremendous degree of family disorientation which exists
So funny
in
how
all
a feminist
communities,
think
including the black community.
Single mother
conservative,
families,
libertarian.
a single mother has the same incentive to send her kid to the best school she can get him into as any other parent.
There are, of course, many children, particularly of high school age, who are totally
there you go. That's what I'm
disassociated from their parents.
talking
That's true.
about.
I think that would be a considerably less than half, too, to use your phrase.
I would like to, for a moment, ask you some questions about the economics of job getting in terms of the blacks versus the whites. The statistics I was able to pull together indicate that at the present time, white males make $17,427 on an average basis for the year. Black males make $12,738. White females make $10,244, and black females make $9,476. It is clear from these figures, as indeed I think it's clear to most of us from what we see, that there is a discrimination against blacks and against women.
Hold on. So you got some numbers and then you just put the conclusion based on those numbers right from the top? Based on this, because whites earn a little bit more than blacks, and then you went, oh no, by the way, they also earn more money than females. So that means these group over here are getting much better than the other one. Therefore, discrimination. That's a long shot, the very long shot. We're not taking accountability. What's the reason for that to happen? And this is back in 1970. I'm very surprised that these arguments were still being thrown today
In our present system. Since not all blacks will be superior, how would you try to even that out so that there would be some equality of job opportunities?
I'm sorry you missed the earlier part of the program when I pointed out that where you find people not represented evenly, that does not show the institutional effect, because almost nowhere in human affairs do you find people evenly represented.
Well,
if you compare comparable people with respect to age, with respect to education, etc., you get a totally different picture, both with respect to blacks and women. Now, the figures that I saw, for example, show more recently that if you take black families where the husband and wife are both college educated and compare them to a white family where the husband and wife are both college educated, the black family is now earning $2,000 a year more. The problem is the problem is that very few blacks fall in that category. That when you compare category for category, then we're talking about getting people a decent education. I'm saying that you cannot say that numbers collected at the employer's place of business reflect simply the employer's policies.
But that's what you just
Those numbers
did.
reflect underlying conditions in the whole society. Just as numbers collected at the hospital do not show you that the people are sick because they're in the hospital.
No, I would agree with that, but you would also have to agree that, generally speaking, women are paid less, for example, for the same jobs as men.
No, I would not. I would not agree with that. If you're talking about women with the same number of years of experience, with the same continuous service, et cetera, then when I look at that, I don't find that disparity. I find, for example, in many cases, the women are making more, depending on how you break the data down. The difference with women is between married women and everybody else.
Yeah.
That's the real difference.
Yeah, I guess with unmarried women, of course, she will probably perform in certain sectors of job, because if we put it in the category building, right, construction, she will not perform as high as a man. But if you put her in nursing, beauty salon, right, during the time, if you never get married, you never have son, she might just increase a little bit in her annual income. Uh, this is the problem because for females, they have something called the biological clock. That means that the interests change by the time they start entering the 30s, because now things are not looking like nature wanted to be in the first place. You have to remember that the females entering the workforce is a new concept that seems not getting results for the fact that we have a higher percentage of females entering depression, right, and mental health and stuff like that. There's something's not working here, and the fact that we were having this debate back in the 1970s, it just show you, 1970 or 80, I don't know, it show you that there's a huge problem here.
Well, even as to single women, the Census Bureau statistics, the most recent ones I could find, 1978, say that single men are earning $11,100 and single women are earning $9,300.
Yes, I love the word single that is used. When I did my study, I didn't use single, I used never married. You see, a woman who is single at age 40, having spent 10 or 20 years raising children, is really not quite the same as a man of age 40 who's been working continuously for 20 years.
And the difference in society is not that great, so it could easily be accounted for.
Wow, that was...
Yes, because when I break them down the other way, I did this for the academic world, and there I found the women who are never married, which is the term I take.
Never married. See, that's different.
They were earning more than the men. And similarly,
lawyers,
the government did data some
nurses,
years ago on women who had been working continuously since high school into their 30s. There you found that they were making slightly more than men of the same description. So the difference is between married women and everybody else. And married men get an extra bonus because their wives take care of many things that enable them to put more time into their careers.
I'm sure you're aware of the fact that there are...
Lady, do you agree with that statement? And just go back and forward. You cannot just allow the statement to just go like that and not, push back a little bit. Like you did earlier. I like that. Or, lady, the lady might only have a couple minutes to ask this question, and hopefully she can have a gotcha moment. That's what I'm thinking. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Am I missing something? Let me know.
One wage earner. So that when you talk about women being able to take care of things for their married mate wage earner, the fact is that in the overwhelming majority of American homes, the women also work. And therefore, I don't think your explanation that women have other responsibilities and that's why they are...
Work can mean part-time work or full-time work. Women do not work full-time to the same extent that men. Part-time workers make less than full-time workers.
May I ask a question about...
That's what you want. You see that little tension right there? Let the tension leave.
Employment.
Let it live.
The latest figures I saw indicated that of black youth,
you have to let tension live.
46% of those who wanted jobs were unable to get jobs. I really would like this time to ask both of you to respond to what would you do in that situation. If you would assume for a moment that these are people who do want jobs and are unable to find work.
I would, first of all, repeal the minimum wage law, because if you go back to, say, 1950, 1948, 49, 50, you find that at that time, the unemployment rate among black teenagers was a fraction of what it is today. And there certainly wasn't any less racism then than there is today. What was different was that at that time, the minimum wage law was a decade old. It was a decade of inflation, and the law hadn't been changed. So for all practical purposes, it didn't exist.
Well, don't you think that was also a decade of expansion, in which there were a lot of jobs, whereas today our economy is in a recession and there are not that many jobs
If you look at the most prosperous years of the 60s and 70s, you don't find black teenage unemployment as low as it was in the recession year of 1949.
Well, I don't know what the job situation was then, but it's only recently that we have reached
I was a black teenager in 1949.
Did you get a job?
It was a recession year, and after a considerable looking, I found a job. But the point is, the kid who was living where I lived then, who's living there now, he has a hell of a lot harder time finding that job, because there are so many good people who have tried to do good for him and priced him right out of the market.
Well, facing the situation as it presently exists, what would you do for that 46%?
If the situation is going to remain as it presently exists, the results will remain as it presently exists.
No, I'm saying now, today, what would you do to help
I would
this 46%?
repeal those things which
But that isn't going to help these 46%, is it?
Nothing
Something has
do you
to be
want
done
do
about
you want to change it or do you want to leave it the same? If you want to leave it the same, everything will continue the same. If you want to change it, it'll change.
No, I think that your suggestions of change contemplate that in the future.
Oh, you don't like those changes. Miss Feminist, here's the thing. Do you like those changes? Okay, you don't like those changes, say it. Don't like those changes, I don't agree with those changes. And move forward with your statement. And I like the fact there was a little bit of back and forward there. Repealing the minimum wage, I need to dig a little bit deeper on that. I heard some arguments regarding the minimum wage. It's a little stretch for me, but if I can see some data that support repealing minimum wage could be good for economy, I want to see it. If you guys know any video or anything that can just show that data, I will appreciate it.
Black youths who are now unemployed, who probably would not be affected by changing the law this year.
You can say that all you want, but the evidence is totally against you.
May I add to this data?
Let her have the fire, man.
George Keller, who was the assistant
Who's
to
the
president of
mediator.
the University of Maryland, who writes in the New York Times, 28 January 1981, quote, "In fact, overwhelming numbers of young blacks are in high school, college, at work, in the military, or at home taking care of babies. The percentage of blacks between 16 and 19 looking for a full-time job and unable to find one is actually 7.8%.
Interesting.
I can't just resolve, perhaps
According
you
to
can.
calculations based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics data.
A similar figure was printed some years ago in Wattenberg's book, The Real America. A lot of those big numbers come from looking at kids who would like to have a job after school, which is fine, and I think it would be better if they had more jobs after school. But those numbers don't relate to what we're talking about when we talk about adult unemployment.
Well, what would you say about the present 8% overall unemployment figure? That also is a lot of people who are looking for part-time jobs, or is that a general figure that indicates that we have a great many unemployed in this country?
There are a great many unemployed. One of the reasons being that we've had the kind of economy we've had for some time now, and all attempts to get the inflation out of it are likely to have these adverse effects. It's tragic. However,
should we warn her that you wrote a book about Say's Law?
Well, I should, no.
No, I am concerned about what we do for people who are presently in a very disadvantaged position because of what's happened on
we
the
try to
economic
remove
front.
as many of the
But I don't like your intentions, lady. Miss Feminist. I don't like your intentions. They're not coming. You might have. Let me rephrase this. Your heart might be in the right place, but you're leading some of these places like you know what is best for this, and I don't think you really understand how this can be dangerous to these communities, because we have the result today, 2022. Some of these communities, they have their affirmative action. They haven't gone to the other, to the other side. I mean, they stretch their help to this community so much that they haven't really helped them out. Because you create a cycle that never ends. What are you going to do? Are you going to wait until these people get super better and then unplug the incentives? It makes no sense. You have to make sure that a lot of these people, they graduate from these places. They come back to these places to make sure they can prosper in this community. But there's no incentive for that. You know why? Because you're in the middle. The middle, I'm saying the government, right? It's in the middle. I mean, take the incentive for people to negotiate and resolve problems. And resolving problems equals profits. I'm not talking about barbershops. I'm not talking about things like bodegas. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people that graduate. They want to come back to the community and invest in the community. Because people need that, man. And I think this affirmative action, all these things, it's interrupting the process of helping the community.
barriers as possible that have put them in that position.
And you think the barriers that have put them in that position are, for example, a minimum wage law?
Minimum wage laws, labor unions, occupational licensing.
Would you abolish labor unions? Huh? Would you abolish labor unions?
You don't have to abolish labor unions. I'm saying that if you're asking me what are some of the things that have done it, I'm giving you some of the things that have done it. Blacks were well represented in many occupations, skilled occupations in the South 2 or 3 generations ago to a greater extent than today, because 2 or 3 generations ago, those industries were not unionized. Construction, railroads, just classic examples. When we have this so-called Philadelphia plans to get blacks into the construction industry, I mean, it would be laughable if it weren't so tragic. Blacks were heavily into the construction industry before it was unionized.
Well, again, I come back to the here and now. Assuming that they are not heavily in the construction industry now, what would you do to cure it? Because I do think
I would do away with or otherwise mitigate the effects of those things that are keeping blacks out of those industries.
Forgive me, but he has said that 3 times.
Well, he has not taken up the cause of those people who would not be immediately affected by changing those laws. In addition to
the acoustics must be very bad in here.
He can't create, as
He's literally just said it like 4 times already. It's crazy, and she doesn't like the answer. I think that's why she's not liking the answer. Therefore, she want to push for him to say another answer. Huh, very interesting.
I also point out to say that somebody should receive more money than he is now making and to pass a law to that effect is not in fact to give him a job for more money. It may very well be to cause unemployment.
I gather that there are many instances where the minimum wage provisions have been waived or do not apply, where the employers have nonetheless not taken advantage of it. So I don't know what empirical
I'm not sure of that at all. I know that there are provisions of the law under which, if you're willing to go through enough red tape, you can get certain exemptions. Particularly for the person who's hiring 1 or 2 people, he may decide that it's just not worth his while.
Interesting.
Would it be your feeling that if all the affirmative action programs were discontinued, women and minorities would go ahead much faster?
Why are we putting women with minority again? Can someone answer me that question? What's the agenda here? Why are you putting women with minorities? Who's the boogeyman here? Who's the boogeyman? I want to know who's the boogeyman that's always behind the closet.
Faster than they have under the affirmative action program?
Yes, it's not my opinion. The data indicate that, for example, Puerto Ricans had a higher percentage of the national average income before quotas than after. So did Mexican Americans. Blacks have about the same. So there's a marvelous putting of the burden on other people. You're saying here's this massive program that has existed now for a decade, and you're unable to show me the benefits that have come from all this enormous controversy.
Interesting.
Well, it certainly has been a revolution insofar as women's participation in the labor force.
Not really. Not really.
Concerned.
No, it hasn't. No,
I
it
know
hasn't.
that of my own knowledge.
No, you don't know it of your own knowledge, because I've also looked at the same thing. And in the past, you found women overrepresented in many professional occupations, much more so than today, and you find that decline in those occupations much more highly correlated with a lower age of marriage for college women and with more childbearing. And as those 2 things, those 2 demographic factors have changed, women have also changed in their representation.
Interesting.
So this whole myth that's been created that this is all a function of political developments of the past decade or so.
So it's not real progress.
Thank you very much.
It looks like progress, but it's not.
And thank you very much, Dr. Thomas Sowell, author of Ethnic America, A History, and Markets and Minorities. And thank you.
Wow, that is so crazy. That is amazing. Amazing. He covered a lot. In paper, it looks like it's a lot of progress, but it's not a lot of progress. It just pretending to have progress, but is it really helping? In papers, it looks amazing, but it's not. If you look at the results are not there. Okay. I come from Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. My family was not the richest. Very humble, middle-class family, making between the family, $40,000 a year. Probably they make money, more because the year has passed on and the skilled labor has increased. Okay, understandable. There was no affirmative actions. There was no unemployment. There was no food stamp. Nothing. We had to work from zero to what I'm right now. I'm very well off. Having said that, the fact that a lot of individuals think that we need handouts, stuff like that, is in itself, it is a degradation to or towards a lot of these communities. Because if you're telling me that you're from one particular race, right? Let's put it that way. You're saying that because of that, I'm from this race, has the power to me, the government, give you what you need, right? Give you what you need. To that, I have to say, completely wrong. You can save it. Teach people how to fish a fish. Don't give them fish every day, okay? And clearly, Mr. Dr. Sowell, he studied this very long to understand the categories and with a lot of arguments. But these arguments are still today, and people believe it. That means that something was not giving the message and not boost to be spread through the culture of the United States. We're still here. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think? Thomas Sowell was on point. The feminist wasn't her point, that she needed to just bring more facts, or this is just the same circle that we been battling for years. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below.